We are not in a traditional war where armies openly face each other, where front lines are clearly visible, and conflicts are fought out in the open. But to conclude from this that we are in a phase of true peace would be a dangerous misjudgment. The reality of modern conflicts has long since shifted. Today, battles are no longer fought solely with weapons, but also with information and even with disinformation. Using data and knowledge, states and strategic actors systematically try to gain as accurate a picture as possible of other countries, of their structures, their decision-making processes, and above all, of their future plans. Communication is monitored, information is collected, analyzed, and linked together. The goal is clearly defined. Information superiority? Whoever knows more can plan better. Whoever can plan better gains advantages without firing a single shot. Master Sun knew this too. More than 2,000 years ago, he offered counsel, compiled military tactics in ancient China, and made this clear in his writings on war. That is exactly the core of an information war. This approach is complemented by disinformation, that is, deliberate attempts to spread false or distorted information in order to create uncertainty and influence decisions. This form of conflict often remains invisible. It develops in the background, continuously, and without clear outward signs. And that is exactly where its strength lies. But any external intelligence gathering is only as successful as the weaknesses within a system. Because no matter how sophisticated external strategies may be, they always need an entry point. And this entry often arises where trust exists. Within government institutions, there are people with access to sensitive information. You can't prevent that. People who work with confidential data, with strategic documents, with plans that are intentionally not public. This system is based on trust and control. But if this trust is broken, the situation changes fundamentally. Then we're no longer talking about a risk or a misjudgment, but about betrayal. A recent case from Germany shows how concrete and real this scenario is. An incident has come to light in the Ministry of Defense where a high-ranking officer of the Bundeswehr was suspended from duty. The background, the suspicion that internal sensitive information was passed on. Specifically, it's about a document that contains a large number of planned armament projects. So it's about insight into which military capabilities are to be developed or further enhanced in the future, and which will become especially relevant for Germany, or rather which are currently still missing. Such information is strategically very important because it provides insight into priorities, planned investments, and the long-term equipment of the armed forces. They were not intended for the public, yet they still got out. And that happened through an internal vulnerability. This turned an internal document into a publicly accessible source of information because it was published, not just for the media, but also for those who are interested in analyzing such data. Of course, this includes foreign actors who rely on such insights to adjust their own strategies. Investigations were then launched within the ministry. It was possible to trace who last had access to the relevant version of this document. The circle of possible suspects was narrowed down, and the officer in question became the focus of the investigation. Recent reports state he admitted to passing on the information. The legal consequences are clear. Such an act can be prosecuted, and in the event of a conviction, can lead to significant penalties. But the legal and political dimension is only part of the bigger picture, which is actually much worse. Because the real significance of the case lies, of course, in its consequences. When military plans become public, it gives potential adversaries an informational advantage. They gain insight into future developments, can see which capabilities are to be expanded, and which possible gaps will continue to exist. That changes the strategic situation. A state whose planning is known loses some of its unpredictability. But it is precisely this unpredictability that is a central factor for our security. It ensures that potential adversaries cannot calculate exactly how a situation will develop. If this factor is lost, a major disadvantage arises, because those who are predictable become vulnerable. Not necessarily through a direct military action, but through targeted strategic adjustments by the other side. If the other side knows which air defense systems we plan to acquire in the future, then they already know how they can respond to them. They know which missiles they need to build or develop in order to evade exactly those systems. They will know how many we will have and can therefore already plan where they will be located. They will know our strength, and they will also know our defensive capabilities. And if these are not sufficient, we have a big problem, because now they are known. More importantly, this case highlights the realization that came from its exposure, discovery, and ongoing investigation. But this leads to the crucial question: how many similar cases are there that have not yet been discovered, that are not even known yet? How many people have similar cases, similar access rights? A lot. And how many of them could theoretically pass on information out of conviction, under pressure, or simply for personal reasons? This invisibility is not a technical problem. It is a risk factor, because betrayal rarely happens openly. It develops in secret, often over long periods of time, without being immediately recognized. And that's exactly why it can have a significant impact before anyone can even respond to it. In an information war, such internal weaknesses are of particular importance. It's not just external attacks that determine security, but also internal stability. When this stability breaks, gaps emerge, and every gap can be exploited. And that has direct consequences. Not for state institutions or military structures, but for society as a whole. Because national security is not an abstract concept. It influences political decisions, economic stability, and ultimately the everyday reality of every single person. If they get out unchecked, it leads to a loss of control. And this loss of control leads to vulnerability. And this is exactly where the real significance of this case lies. It shows that modern conflicts don't just take place at external borders, but also within our own systems. And it makes clear that the major danger doesn't always have to come from outside, but sometimes arises from within. In the end, one clear conclusion remains. In a world where information has become one of the most crucial resources, protecting it is equivalent to protecting our own security. And if this protection fails, it's not just about data or documents, it's about stability and ultimately about your security. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, the Algen crew, and especially Oberstleiter Reneke, Sealer, Dietrich Ferdl, and Meyerhofer. Feel free to subscribe, like, and leave comments. See you in the next video.